Oh, here's a gift for you.
Oh, gee,
El Rey
oh,
tequila with a couple of
you
El Rey
kidding me?
glasses.
Hey, that's fantastic. Hey, cheers.
You can slate those two.
This is George Miller, and I ride with El Rey.
Here we go. For sec. And action.
So we're here in Austin, Texas at El Rey Network headquarters. And I heard you're in town for South by Southwest. And you were very kind enough to take the request to come here and do an episode of The Director's Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to Austin.
Thanks, Robert. That's great.
You've been one of our more groundbreaking, influential, trend-setting, and most imitated directors of all time. And here's why. Mad Max. The Road Warrior. Twilight Zone, the movie. Nightmare at 20,000 feet. Beyond Thunderdome. Witches of Eastwick.
Who are you? Just your average horny little devil.
Lorenzo's Oil.
Something is affecting his brain.
Babe, Pig in the City. Happy Feet. And Fury Road. You just have such a very interesting career. So I wanted to start with just some of your early days before we go into your films. And how was it that you began to think visually and want to be someone who made visual arts? Because I know you were trained as a doctor originally.
Well, first of all, I grew up in a remote rural town in the outback of Australia. And there was no television then, and there was a Saturday matinee, and there were comics. And I grew up with brothers, and we'd play out what we saw in the movies and read in the comics. And it was an invisible apprenticeship to make movies.
Right.
And then anything like this, I'd read the magazines, American Cinematographer, and we'd scrutinize them and how they, oh, that's how they do the car rig and so on. And, and anything that Hitchcock said became like a little dictum. But I learned where I think we should all learn in the cinema. I just consumed everything. French Connection. The music was the sound of the vehicle and the tires on the road. The stagecoach scene in Stagecoach, and you're just watching how they're constructed. And then the big influence on me was Buster Keaton, because cinema, the silent era I'm talking, they were able to do things that you could see nowhere else. It wasn't a recording device. It was actually creating a language. And I suddenly thought, oh, wow, this is amazing.
How did you make that jump from someone who's a fan of films and thought visually and listened to interviews to going, I'm gonna make a go for this?
One of my brothers came to me one day and said, look, there's a competition at the university. You've got 1 hour to make a 1-minute film shot in the camera and silent. And whoever wins the competition goes to a film workshop.
That's it.
And to avoid my studies, I said, oh, I've got an idea. And I told him this idea, and it won. And he ended up going to this film workshop. And then I talked my way into the film workshop. And we shot a little film. We all got to shoot a little film, but everyone ran out of time. So I stayed back and I borrowed some editing equipment and cut the film. And that was the first moment where I had that experience of adding the dimension of time to pictures. And that was the beginning of a journey into narrative.
Right. But your first real opportunity was that contest that you did. Because sometimes people wonder when their break is going to come. That contest came up and you said, hey, I think I can do that. And you won the contest and it put you in a workshop with other filmmakers.
Yes.
That really was the beginning of your filmmaking career.
Yeah, that was the realization you could.
Had you not taken that contest on and went back and done your studies, it'd be a different story.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. So people sometimes you have to look out for that moment, and happening with a contest as well. Like a contest that you win suddenly makes you feel, oh, maybe I could win more if I continue. And that's how it begins. That first stepping forward and going, I'm going to try this and put myself out there. So that's something really cool. I'm glad we found
what was the step for you? When
for
you
me,
went from an
well, I was
artist
making a
to-
bunch of movies since I was a kid. I put one in a contest one, and it won me a trip to New York and a director's chair. And I was like 19, and I thought, I got a trip to New York for a movie I made. I'll go make 10 more, maybe one of them. And they kept winning. And then like 2 summers later, I said, I'm going to go try and shoot a movie by myself in
there you
Mexico.
go.
And it was El Mariachi. That's the movie that broke out.
The big moment for me was when I was working in this hospital. I decided to make a little film for the hospital review, and it was nuns on motorbikes, and there was a laugh in it, an accidental laugh, and it's the first time I saw anything that I'd shot in an audience, and it was just because of the way it was cut. It was one thing to get your hands on film and then cut it and make a film, but a film doesn't exist without an audience.
Yeah.
And when you get that experience and bring the two together, suddenly that was a big aha moment to me.
Yeah. And then Mad Max.
Hey, Max. We are 100% snafu.
I have so much I want to talk about Mad Max. It was so inspiring. You seem like you were just doing your own crazy thing. I was like, how did he come up with the idea to do this
Well,
movie?
I think what happened with Mad Max is that I didn't think I was slumming doing an exploitation movie. I treated it as high, what I thought was because of what I explained, about the realization that was where a new language, a new global language was created. So one of my notions was that if I make it as the action sequences as a silent movie, and it reads as a silent movie, then it can only get better with sound. I want you to see it and see if you know exactly what it is, and even impacts. It was very hard to sell an impact with vision.
Right.
But we put flash frames in and little eyes popping just to,
Oh, yeah.
Little things
That
like
big eye popping shot. How did you even do that? Was that?
it's a low budget movie. I mean, you know about that, $350,000 Australian dollars back
it's a
then.
great shot. So I was just wondering how you even did it.
Well,
With any budget, how did you do it?
we arranged to have a guy to bring his truck, and when he saw, well, I'm not going to run my truck. I mean, we're paying him nothing.
Oh, funny.
And into this vehicle, so they put so he turned up with a big plate on it. A big plate. It was just a rusty plate. Looked nothing like the real truck. This is the next day after we shot the point of view. Mm-hmm. And so one of our young art department just painted headlights and a grill and everything on it.
Funny.
So when it played out, it just didn't look that impactful.
Right.
And I thought this is the big sort of moment. So I went out with my partner, the producer, Byron Kennedy, and then we had a stick. It was shot in the lounge room of the apartment, and we just pushed the eyes through the latex. But the biggest thing,
I never would have figured that out.
that sequence wasn't as good without those few extra shots.
Yeah. Did you actually edit with an editor, or did you edit yourself sometimes? Or
I'd worked with an editor, a really good editor from television, but he only gave us 6 weeks. We ran out of money, and I remember Byron saying, "Well, that's the movie," and I said, "Look, all I know is there's a better movie in there in the footage. I just don't, it was a question of just massaging it to get it." So then I spent another 9 months.
oh my God,
Just looking at every frame.
you have a very distinct visual style. You became almost fully formed in your first film. I mean, I studied your editing in that. How did you ever even learn to do? I would study the frame by frames that you did. It was brilliantly edited. How did you figure that out?
Great
Is that
to
just-
hear that you did that.
Oh my God,
yeah.
I couldn't. I would study it and go, wow, the sense of pacing and timing. That gave you this breathless feeling. You captured the breathless feeling of the road. When did you come up with the idea to like just be scraping the ground with a camera and getting these really heroic shots of even the cars going by? I mean, it just was, we'd never seen anything like that before.
Byron, who started off as a cameraman, he said, "Look, it's got to be a big widescreen." And because we weren't shooting in city, because it was, there was open skies on the road, you need to have road blur or something moving past to indicate speed. So we just kept getting the camera as low as we possibly could to the road, and that combined with a wide angle lens, and also shooting along the Z or Z axis in and out of the screen. Trying to force a sense of three-dimensionality. I definitely had the Hitchcock dictum in my head, definitely. He said, "I try to make movies where they don't have to read the subtitles in Japan." And as it turned out, the Japanese really took to it.
When did you know that you really had something that would play to audiences internationally? Was it not till it got released and you saw that there was this mythical character? You kind of figured out the myth afterwards, right?
I remember by then I was working with my friend Terry Hayes, and I said, "I don't understand why this film worked so well in Japan," because when I went up to Japan, they said, "Oh, Mad Max is a Ronin, a lone samurai." It reminds me a lot of the Kurosawa movies. And this is embarrassing to say, but I said, "Who's Kurosawa?" I'd never seen a Kurosawa movie.
Right.
I thought, holy cow. And then it went to France, and they said, "Oh, it's a Western on wheels." And of course it's a Western on wheels. It's the lone gunman and so on. And these are common stories in
Common
most,
myths and
the common
cultures,
myths.
yeah.
And basically, all I had done is unwittingly had tapped into classic hero myth that Campbell so brilliantly described in a world monoculture. But in that case, we tapped into that larger thing. But the big thing about it, it was so hard to make that I honestly thought I wasn't cut out to make movies. It felt like what was in my head and what we'd so carefully prepared, things kept on getting in the way, unexpected things, ridiculous things, like the end scene when a guy gets handcuffed to the back of the vehicle and is about to blow up.
The chain in those handcuffs is high tensile steel. It'll take you 10 minutes to hack through it with this. Now, if you're lucky, you can hack through your ankle in 5 minutes. Go.
We're in tall grass on a farmer's property, and he's not certain about this big explosion we're going to do, and the lights failing, and suddenly we go to do take two, and we can't find the key to the handcuffs.
Oh no.
So it took us 2 hours in amongst the grass to find the key to the
Oh,
handgun.
jeez.
I mean, it really, you can't be vain. You think there's a kind of an artistic vanity that, oh yeah, I've created this and whatever, but the secret is it's like life, you know. As John Lennon said, life's what happens when you're making other plans, and the movie that you end up with is the one that happens at the time. I was talking to Peter Weir, who's a wonderful Australian director, and I just said, it's so difficult. It was like walking a really big dog. I wanted to go that way, the dog dragged me this way. And he said, but George, all movies are like that. He said, you've got to go into a movie as if you're on patrol in the jungle with a platoon. And he said, you don't know where the snipers are, you don't know where the landmines are, and they're going to come.
Right.
But you've got to complete the job. You try to bring it all together into that camera and capture it all the ingredients together at that moment. But there's a certain flexibility, a flow that you have to have and be alert to those things.
Did you know it was being dubbed American accents in the U.S., Mad Max, the original one?
Well, yeah, it was really embarrassment, and we got into a lot of trouble in Australia.
You and me are gonna talk about the toe cutter. Never heard of him.
The worst thing was Hugh Keys-Burns, who plays the toe cutter. He came from the Royal Shakespeare Company. So here, English actors, and he's a beautiful English voice. And when his family saw it, I don't know how, in England, and all his friends turned up, he opens his mouth.
Ah! I hate guns.
It really taught me how important sound is in dubbing and looping, but even looping, you know, re-looping a performance when you need to get the sound again.
Yeah.
If you don't get it just right, it sounds very canned.
Yeah, very.
And even a great performance suddenly doesn't seem like a great performance when you just change the sound.
Yeah.
Because if you watch, you know, Hugh Keys-Burns saying Night Rider, his name is the Night Rider. Remember him when you look at the night sky. You go, this is a terrible dialogue and a terrible actor.
Yeah.
And then it was like, everyone's terrible in this movie. And then they finally released the Australian version.
Yeah.
Night Rider. His name is the Night Rider.
That's great.
The Night Rider. That is his name.
Remember him when you look at the night sky.
Remember him when you look at the night sky.
And you're like, oh my God, that's the best actor I've ever seen. This dialogue's fantastic. Just by the sound, it blew me away.
Still part of me cringes when I hear it. And then the Actors' Equity, the criminal SAG, you know, they said we had no right, and they were absolutely right. It's still an embarrassment now today.
Here I am, trying to put sense to it, when I know there isn't any.
The Road Warrior.
I was able to study everything that worked and everything that failed.
Here we go. For sec. Here we go. For sec. And action.
The Road Warrior. Where did the vision of Road Warrior come from?
I think that paradoxically, one of the best things that happened on Mad Max 1 is that I confronted my failure for a year while I was cutting it, because I kept on saying, why did I do that? Why did I do that? Why did I? And I was able to study everything that worked and everything that failed.
Right, right.
So what I learned from Mad Max was amplified into Road Warrior. We had to prepare the film and shoot the film and edit the film in very, very quick time. And so it was the opposite of Mad Max. But I had those two things. The thing that Peter Weir said was treat it like you're going into warfare and adjust to anything that happens. That was one thing. The second thing is, because of the nature of the story happening over about 2 or 3 days, and there was attrition to the man and the vehicles and whatever, we shot in continuity.
Really?
And that was really a big deal.
How did you come up with shots? Was it Dean or you that, like the signatures type shots in Road Warrior, like going up the car right into Mel Gibson's face, these sort of fast push-ins, and a lot of those driving shots feel like they're at speed. How did you get that kinetic feel in Road Warrior? Because it's just relentless and it feels so great.
One of the things I learned on Mad Max, as much as it cost, that some shots were too static, so we actually built in some camera shake.
Wow, that's great.
Just to create a sense of speed.
Yeah.
So by the time we got to Road Warrior, I was making sure we had some degree of camera shake to make it as real as possible.
And that's probably easier that way, because you didn't have to bolt everything down so much.
Yeah. He'd often have it on bungee, and one time he came off the lens on a big shot, and his eye was cut. I said, "What do you think? Have we got it?" And he said, "I have no idea."
He's just a great shooter. I mean, Dean was amazing. What was your relationship with Dean like?
I realized that Dean was the first person who saw the movie through the camera, exactly what the frame was and the performance. There was no video split, hadn't been invented. We were on a remote location, so we'd only ever see dailies at the end of the week. So I became really reliant.
Right.
The moment you yell cut, usually all the actors look to you because you're the mirror to their performance.
Yeah.
If they lose themselves in the performance, you're the one who's going to make them safe and say too much and not enough, blah, blah, blah. But I immediately looked to Dean and how he comes off the eyepiece. If he comes off thoughtfully, I realize we're going to do another take. If he comes off and he's feeling good, and I didn't have to ask him. It's just feeling the body language.
So Mad Max and Road Warrior, changed action movie making forever. It introduced the post-apocalyptic action film. How did you pull off just making that world work?
I'm sure you do the same when you're designing a world. You start off with very, very some basic backstory rules, if you like, that everyone can work to. Anybody could do anything, but providing that it was something that had antecedent before the apocalypse. In other words, it's found objects or surviving objects repurposed. So it's almost, and it had to have a strong aesthetic.
Yeah.
Even if places are really, really impoverished, you go to poor places in the world, doesn't mean people lose their artistry.
Right.
The people can put a lot of love into the aesthetic. They got the time, and if they fashion a weapon, they're going to try to make it as well. And it might be made from junk, but it's still got to be made well.
Right. It's one of the greatest scores, too, of all time. Brian May's score is relentless and propulsive, and the shots just feel like you feel like you're strapped to the front of one of those cars. I played that score in my car. Don't ever play this score in your car. You almost drive off the road.
Okay.
You almost drive off the road. It gets you so amped up. There's some sequences where you drop the music out completely and let it play like it's real. And it's very, very powerful.
The chariot race in Ben-Hur had a big influence on Mad Max because it was an extended sequence with no music.
I had found on the VHS copy of Road Warrior, the making of Mad Max 2, and it's only 5 minutes long. Because it's basically the making of is just two stunts gone wrong. And you realize this is cinema verite. This guy, that stunt, I always used to wonder. And I imitated in one of my movies, Spy Kids 3, where a kid hits a bike and he flips over. I mean, I imitated it completely. Just paid an homage to Road Warrior during a high-speed chase, and had to be like Road Warrior. But when the guy hits the dune buggy and he flips, and you watch that movie going, how did they plan that stunt? And then you watch you watch the behind the scenes.
He'd previously broken his femur.
Oh no.
And had a steel bolt down the center of his femur. So he didn't break his leg in that accident because it bent.
Bent the metal.
It bent the metal. So he would have broken it.
It would have broken it.
And he came back and kept working on the film.
So how did you work out the stunts? Like, I know Tony Scott would use like little matchbook box cars.
You're going to run with the action, you're going to overtake the action.
Box cars. By the time we got to Mad Max 2, I made one deal with myself that I would always storyboard, no matter how bad they were, 2 days ahead.
Wow.
So people could
you were drawing real time, like going.
It was real.
You didn't do it before. You were doing it like 2 days before.
Yeah.
So you were on.
Yeah.
Constantly.
Yeah, and I'd stay up, and my drawing it got worse and worse, and as I got tired and tired, at 1 o'clock I'd find myself doing that, and I'd give it to the crew, and Dean Semler, and he was the only one who kept his. The other ones would look at it and couldn't understand it. And it was winter, and we had 44-gallon drums, to warm up the crew. And one time I looked back and they were just all throwing it into the fire.
Yeah.
But Dean kept it. He's still got his. The big stunt on Road Warrior where that truck rolls. Every night I'd go and check out the rig, the cage. I made a business of studying really bad accidents and stunt deaths across, some of the great stuntmen in the early eras, even the silent eras. Usually it's something that you do over and over again, so everyone's guard is down. Not long after that, I was on that Twilight Zone movie where they were shooting in
that was
terrible
accident. Nightmare at 20,000 feet.
I basically inherited the crew from E.T. I left that film feeling I've lost all my curiosity for filmmaking.
Here we go. For sec. Here we go. For sec. And action.
Nightmare at 20,000 feet. It's one of my favorite films of yours.
What you're looking at could be the end of a particularly terrifying nightmare. It isn't. It's the beginning.
I was always, like so many, a huge fan of Twilight Zone. I thought, wouldn't it be great? Like, probably a year before, it occurred to me it'd be great to work on something like that, and sure enough, here it is. You know Stephen, he's a really, he's a great enthusiast and very generous. And E.T. was about to come out, and Poltergeist, he was very, very busy. He said, but hey, we want to do Twilight Zone. And they were going to do 2 stories, one with John Landis, one with Joe, and one with Stephen. And they said, oh, let's find another story, and we'll do 4. And it was a really, really good experience, and it was shot very, very efficiently. I basically inherited the crew from E.T. Alan Davio, there was John Toll operating, Alan lighting. There was Garrett Brown, who invented Steadicam, and he was using it as an anti-Steadicam. Just brilliant group of people, and I felt like I was home. These were my tribe.
Wow.
And then when they watched the movie, they felt it might be the one to sort of end.
Wow. So you weren't even shooting it to be the end piece. You just shot your
we
piece.
we just shot
It's
it.
clearly the end piece. It's just so great.
There's a man on the wing of this plane!
You know, it's really strange what happened during that time. Byron Kennedy, who was my partner, he was killed in a helicopter accident. And we learned to make films together. Our skill sets were very complementary. It took me a long time to really understand sound in film because he did that.
Your company is called Kennedy Miller Productions.
Yeah.
And you kept the name. You keep the name still.
Yeah, yeah. It was pretty hard. So that part of my life was what happened during that time. Not only did I have to continue working, I was grieving, and it was more or less to keep working. And then we'd already committed to do Beyond Thunderdome.
Thunderdome. How do I get in there?
Thunderdome. 2 men enter, 1 man leaves.
The Thunderdome is still one of the greatest one-of-a-kind sequences. Where did the idea come from, and what were the difficulties of shooting that set?
Thunderdome, I can't even tell you. I knew we needed a gladiatorial contest. When I was a kid, there were circuses, and they used to have people riding on the back of horses, like a girl in a tutu, and they always had a harness and a cable. And then they'd get someone from the town to get up, usually some guy, young guy, and he'd have to ride on the back of the horse, like stand up.
Right.
But the clowns would hold the cable, and the person would go, and they'd fall immediately, and they'd swing around. And I thought, that was a great idea. And
it's partly from there.
And that's inspired the bungee.
It's a fantastic sequence. It's like, how did you come up with this? That makes sense.
Well, that was
partly from there.
I always remembered it, and it was a cage, and the idea that it was gladiatorial. 2 men enter, 1 man leaves.
Did they pull him all the way to the side, bungee him across? I mean, it wasn't logistically just really difficult to pull off?
It was Grant Page, who was a great stuntman on the first Mad Max. He then worked it out, and they had hydraulics to augment it, so it was fake to some degree. They'd press it, and there was an extra haul on the body. The casting, I remember, we kept on saying that the Tina Turner, RT Entity, Tina Turner's character, we kept on saying, oh, well, she's like Tina Turner. And then one day, one of us said, why not ask Tina Turner?
This is Thunderdome. Death is listening, and we'll take the first man that screams.
She was one of those actors or people you encounter in life who had a big influence on me. She and Jack Nicholson were great, great life teachers, wise people. We may not know it looking at them from afar, but when you had the privilege of knowing them.
Which is of Eastwick?
Hocus pocus.
The moment I read it, just came off the page. But the inherent infrastructure of that film with John Peters and Peter Goober, and the way that the studio was working was just chaotic. Probably not, shouldn't say too much, but it was chaotic. I went from the best case scenario to a worst case scenario because I wasn't paying attention.
Right.
My only other Hollywood experience was with
Steven
and Frank and Kathy and Alan Darby,
whatever you want to do.
It was just
creative freedom.
really effortless filmmaking. It was just great, a great time. And I thought, oh, that's easy. I don't worry about, it'll be just the same. It's the same studio. It's the same. Bad mistake. And I've learned now that the casting of your crew is as critical as the casting of your cast.
Right. I love the movie, by the way. Actually, there's one of his Jack Nicholson's best performances, most fun performances.
Yeah, great.
What do you want from us? I want somebody to eat shirts! That's what I want!
What do I want, Christ?
What does a man want?
A little affection.
So we had a thing where he'd do often long takes. Each one, it was like turning up the volume.
Women, a mistake? Or did he do it to us on purpose?
A little bit more.
Because if it's a mistake, maybe we could do something about it!
Until it went too far. And he was completely in command of what he was doing.
Yeah.
As I said before, he was one of the great privileges of my life. There's something about that guy, incredibly loyal. And twice I was totally happy to quit the movie. It was just crazy. And he was the one who kept me in there. He said, all you got to do is look at the work, look at the dailies. We're doing great work. Hang in there. And he became my sort of guardian angel and negotiated me through all of this. But I left that film feeling I've lost all my curiosity for filmmaking.
What do you think you learned from that? Because there's always a positive to that. One, you get the great relationship you got with Jack and Gideon. How did you even direct someone like Jack?
First of all, he said, look, they're paying me a lot, but you're not going to get an actor. You're going to get a filmmaker. He'd turn up on his days off with the three women to feed them lines off camera.
Right.
He was there for the film. He was a filmmaker.
Right.
He said he'd just come off The Shining. He said, if Stanley wanted me to go through a door for the 100th time, he had his own good reason. He had also done Preach His Honor before that with John Huston, who was directing in a wheelchair with oxygen mask. And he said, when John wants me to get it in take one, I'll get it in take one. I'll give it to you. And when there was issues with the studio about endings or things like that, and I hit some turbulence and they were interfering, he was there having a word, using his clout. So he got the film made as much as I did.
Lorenzo's Oil.
Having been a doctor, I said, if this is halfway true, it's a remarkable story. Even the lawyers, when we went to buy the rights, said, are you serious? You want to buy the rights to a talking pig movie?
Here we go. Percent. Here we go. Percent. And action.
So, Lorenzo's Oil.
Lorenzo has ALD. That causes a degeneration of the brain. Its progress is relentless. All boys with ALD die, usually within 2 years of diagnosis.
We're gonna count together, you and I, all right? Listen to Mommy's voice, and the boo-boo will let go.
You've been in a lot of white-knuckled movies, but There are none more tense than Lorenzo's oil. I mean, it's not something, the intensity makes it hard to revisit, on a regular basis. Was it because of your background as a doctor that you even came across this story?
Yeah, that was a story I read in a newspaper where the parents discovered the essential cure to their son's fatal illness, which was very rare.
Tell your brain to tell your arm to tell your hand to move your little finger. Come on, sweetheart.
Having been a doctor, I said, if this is halfway true, it's a remarkable story.
This is Charles, and this is Harry, and they've both been on Lorenzo's oil for 2 years.
I spoke to the journalist in Britain who wrote it. Just about everything in that movie happened as it was. We had to adjust it very little for a drama.
Was that like the elixir you needed to kind of cure whatever you went through on
it was.
Best Actress and Best Original Screenplay nomination. This is what started getting you into the recognition for filmmaking. After Lorenzo's Oil, you spent nearly 20 years making family films. Now, I'm someone who jumps from Sin City to kids films because I saw you do it. I mean, I really saw that I was able to play in the different areas that I was interested in. To me, they're all the same. They're all fantasy.
There you go.
Let's talk about Babe.
Who are you? Babe.
King Smith wrote a lot of stories about the pig, but Babe, that was the one that followed the hero bit.
Wow, so you
I saw the pattern, I recognized the pattern. When people say, what, Babe, Happy Feet, Mad Max, people say, what's the connection? But he's a classic hero myth story.
Someone give us a hand!
Was there any resistance to the idea when you pitched it? Or people...
Even the lawyers, when we went to buy the rights, said, are you serious? You want to buy the rights to a talking pig movie?
I want my mom.
The method that you used also, by shooting it so realistically and not animating it, because it would have been like probably someone's idea, well, let's just animate the whole thing.
Yeah.
That was very groundbreaking, and that's what really, it's been imitated so much.
Yeah.
But that was an idea you had to just keep it real.
I knew it had to be. And we literally waited almost 10 years for the technology. Well, not 10 years, but quite a bit.
Why did you not direct that one?
It's because the timings didn't work out. By then I was doing Lorenzo's Oil. But as it turned out, had to get heavily involved with the film, and particularly in the post-production.
And then you did the sequel. 3 times the budget, 800 animals.
Yeah.
You shot for almost a year and a half.
It was a lot of animals. I got to be quite expert on animals and primates, and very, very interesting, actually. Fantastic animal trainers. And a lot of people were theorizing that animals don't have emotion, and I was convinced that it's very clear they have emotions. You can tell when they're depressed, you can tell when they're happy, and I'm talking about all animals.
Then you went full CG with Happy Feet.
I saw a documentary on penguins, was fascinated by them. The cameras and the equipment were able to go down into the cold and spend a lot of time during the Antarctic winter to actually film their life cycle. The first time really people understood about them, I thought they're a wonderful analogy, metaphor for humankind. And then Andrew Lesnie, who shot the 2 Babe movies, had then gone on to shoot Lord of the Rings. And he came back from the first one and showed me the first motion capture of Gollum.
Wow.
And those 2 things just immediately light bulb, we can actually make penguins dance. And dancing is another form of action movie.
Right. So you spent several years just even building the animation pipeline, and then another, couple of years making it. Do you enjoy the process?
The biggest thing I learned was that you could take the same voice performance, the same animation performance, the same physical performance, the same location, and just by changing the camera, you can strongly influence the narrative.
Right.
So it was the one which proved to me that the camera tells the story in many ways.
Wow.
And I remember Polanski somewhere a quote where he said, "There's only one perfect place for the camera at any given moment." Doing Happy Feet was an opportunity to test that out. So you could take everything the same, but just move the camera digitally, only too well, and you can get a different feeling or different meaning, or you can get a different point of view. And several times we used that in the movie. So that sort of worried me a little bit when we went back to live action, because you don't have time to think about it.
Right.
No matter how carefully you storyboard it.
Action!
Fury Road. And we're going to watch it here.
Yeah.
And watch the audience go crazy.
Here we go. Percent. Here we go. Percent. And action. Here we go. Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Well, that movie was insane. Congratulations, man.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks
really
so much.
Enjoyed it.
Yeah.
When we did our interview, I hadn't seen the movie yet. I felt like I was 13 again. I saw Road Warrior and Mad Max in the theater when I was younger. And I had that feeling again. I've watched it twice today. I saw it this morning at 9 o'clock. It's the best way to wake up in the morning, is to watch that movie. And then again now, and you just got to keep watching it, just like the other ones, because it's such an immense world. You create such a huge world, and you get a snapshot of it in your films. What blows me away is that you could have easily just made another movie off the worlds that you had already created in the other films, yet you go and top yourself again. What was it about Max's world that kept coming back to you that made you want to come back and do it again and do it so incredibly?
It really started with the idea of just doing an extended chase. I think that's almost a pure form of film language. We learned to read films, and now, far over a century later, we're now speed readers. The second idea was that the MacGuffin, the thing that people are in conflict over, should be human cargo.
That's my property!
Basically saying that everyone in the story is one way or another a commodity. Max is a blood bag, the girls are breeders, the war boys are cannon fodder, and everyone has brand on them. So that you didn't have to get too much exposition. You knew that people were just running away.
Pick up what you can and run.
It was a film conceived visually. It was like a silent movie with sound and music.
Charlize did such a great job. Furiosa is like female Mad Max. I mean, you really pulled off something incredible there. All the characters are so realized. And I love the performance that you got from Tom Hardy. I love that he actually was just playing Max. He didn't try to reinvent it completely.
If you can't fix what's broken, you'll go insane.
It really feels like you're just back in the world that you started from the beginning. Did you bring Hugh Key's burn back? Is it throwback to Mad Max, or is it just because he's just so badass?
You try to create a world that goes well beyond the edges of the screen, and Hugh and that spirit did a huge amount of that.
Where is she taking them?
We had backstory, not only on all the characters, but every vehicle, every weapon. For instance, if I talked to Coma the Doof Warrior, that guitar was a hospital bedpan, double neck guitar, and a flamethrower all in one. It comes out of a logic. Before modern communications, there was always the music of war. The drummer, the bagpipes, the bugler, and so on. Well, they're not loud enough in all the vehicles. As wacky as it all seems, everything had logic.
The thing with the polecats, how did you come up with that?
I'd seen a long time ago a bit of street theatre with some people in some period costumes doing this on those poles, and I thought, you know, they have to board the war rig a bit like pirates. How can they do it? And I thought, well, okay, let's see if we can put them on vehicles. But I really imagined that we'd be CGing the guys on the pole and the vehicles and comping them in later. And one day I looked up and there they were, all just coming at me in about, and it got so that we got Tom Hardy up there, and it was only when he got up there that he said, "George, I'm very bad with heights."
You see a guy in the street performing on a pole, and only you would think, I wonder if I put that on a car.
You're the same. I mean, God.
Hey, I've been doing this 20 years. I'll never be the same as you. Even with the devil's phone number, I won't be anywhere close to. I'm not here asking you these questions, and you always say, Robert, well, you know. No, I don't. I have no fucking clue how you did this. I would never know. I just don't. I can't comprehend how you even pull these things off. They're absolutely amazing.
As they say, you don't have to be crazy to make a Mad Max movie, but it helps. The way I think of filmmaking, it's such a seductive thing. It encompasses every human discipline you can imagine. Composition, art, technology, music, movement, and choreography. It encompasses all of life. We are the servants of the zeitgeist. We live in a chaotic world. There's so much information coming at you. We're trying to find resonances out there to create some sort of meaning.
That's my property!
Come to Daddy.
Stories are a way of distilling something out of all that bombardment. They are a way of finding signal in the noise.
Where are you gonna run? Where are you gonna hide?
Just walk away.
I live, I die.
That's very seductive. Very.
This is George Miller. Very privileged to have him here on the El Rey Network for the Director's Chair. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. That's
Gracias,
good, Robert.
señor.
Hey, Robert, that's the best interview I've ever had. Seriously.